Now, we've already covered Magmans and Dryads when it comes to reflavoring D&D races into new options that we can play with. But what about Wendigo or Starspawn? Let's continue our dive into monsters of the multiverse and taking the mechanics and telling a different story with them, giving us new racial options for our NPCs and our players without even touching Homebrew. Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. Now, I will add again that in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, you can always choose a custom lineage and reflavor and reskin the feat into a new race, but I think it would be sad to ignore all of the other options that we have in the races already available to us. And in my opinion, they're often better than the feats that we have. But again, if the race appears in settings like Ravnica or Eberron, where they came from those settings, they will have their own video that I'll do in the near future. So first on the docket with our first example, the Flying Fae, the Fairy. Aside from flying, you can also cast the spells Druidcraft, Fairy Fire, and Enlarge Reduce. But being the small and even sometimes tiny Fae that they are, it does open up a lot of opportunities to reflavor into other Fae. We also have sprites, pixies, brownies, all with different lores depending on what universe you put them in. This would also be your chance to be a small fairy dragon, and you can even reflavor your dragon breath to be the fairy fire that you cast. Kilmius value generosity and hospitality if you're going for more of a weird looking kind of fae. And then we have the Chwinga, which is technically an elemental, but to me they're really close to the fae and how they interact and give blessings and things like that, so there you go. But along those same lines, we have the Campestry, which is a plant, but also coming from the Fae and sings very good. But then for other Fae that don't look Fae or act like Fae, but they are Fae, it would be the Devilkin and the Mites. But they embody emotions like anger or terror, a lot like the Redcap, actually. And a fun one that we can take from Spanish folklore would be the Cocalena, which is a crocodile-like creature, Fae-ish. I just say Fae because it has butterfly wings. It works. Our next race is also Fae influenced, but not necessarily the Fae race. We have the Firbolg. Now, these are actually one of my favorite races, specifically because they're described nowadays as more bovine in features, but in origin, we know them to be giantkin. But because they are big, they can lift twice as heavy things. They can also cast things like Disguise Self and Detect Magic, as well as turn themselves invisible a couple times per day. And then they have this feature where they can speak to plants and animals and vegetation, which I didn't think that there needed to be that clarification, but apparently. Now, this race gives me a lot of mythological vibes. So one idea that I had would be the Onikuma, which is a Japanese folklore of a bear-like creature that sneaks into villages, often disguising themselves to do so, which is also similar to Selkies as well, who are originally seals, but they take off their coat of skin and become human. If you're familiar with Disenchanted, this could also be a bear. I could say that it's like any animal that has a animal skin that they can kind of take on and off. Obviously a little creepy if they take off like other humanoid skins in like Disguise Self, so maybe just perfect for your druid. Ooh, and I just had this thought, what if you were a Selkie but you had your skin stolen? So you can't transform back into your animal form. This might also make a good werewolf type of character that is hiding their abilities, but also explains their adaptness nature. And then one interesting idea I had was, of course, the Wendigo, another mythological creature that is basically a cannibal and absorbs powers from the things that they eat. And well, let's say that your Firbolg can transform into other people after they eat them. Wow, our lovable cow creature real got dark real fast. But next we have a two-parter, both the Gith Yankee and the Gith Sarai. A original one race called the Gith that was split into two, one taking on more melee kind of abilities and one more spellcasting. First, with the Gith Yankee, you get resistance to psychic damage, as well as the ability to tune into previous ancestors to get different proficiencies of weapons or tools. You also get the spells Mage Hand, Misty Step, and Jump, which gives you a variety of advantages in your combat scenarios. So I would say you could really just use the stat block as a trained individual of any race. Now, Gith Sarai also has psychic damage, but instead of tuning into past lives, you're just really good against being frightened or charmed. And then your spells includes Mage Hand, Shield, and Detect Thoughts. And both of these races are really known for their psionics or mental powers. And so a lot of these things could be reflavored into your Mind Flayer character, which you could also be a part of the hive still, or disconnected from the hive mind in some way. And technically both Gith and the Mind Flayers are alien races, so really just use this for your own alien race. You could be the little green men from Mars and reflavor your spellcasting and teleporting to be more futuristic alien gadgets. Take inspiration from Star Wars, Star Trek, or Mass Effect, or the famous D&D alien, the Star Spawn. Depending on if you went Githzerai or Githyanki, you could be a Gru, or a Hulk, or a Seer, or a Mangler, or a Larva Mage, all part of these Star Spawns. All of them equally terrifying, but perfect for your upcoming Spelljammer campaign. And then one more race that I might add just from a previous setting, the Blues, which is a psionic goblinoid type creature. But speaking of the goblin, let's look at it next. We have a little small creature that has dark vision as well as advantage against being charmed. You can dodge and disengage as a bonus action, as well as do extra damage from creatures that are taller than you or bigger. Think small and ferocious. But an interesting thing about the goblin is that there are so many iterations of what they look like and how they act across all media, as well as in D&D. Starting with the Bukas would be a desert-like race from Eberron, and from the same setting you also get the Dolgrim, which is kind of an amalgamation when two goblins get smashed together. This being done by planar creatures called the Delkir, and if you want to learn more about that, there's actually a video on Eberron character creation that I did, so check that out. Another race would be the Nilbogs, which is funnily enough just goblins spelled backwards, but they were regular goblins who were possessed by a trickster spirit, and is now unnervingly chaotic and joyful. But leaning on the small and ferocious idea that we talked about before, this could really be an excellent race for small animal creatures. I'm thinking beastkin like red pandas, raccoons, even small dinosaurs, or cats, dogs, monkeys, big rats, badgers, and some small lizards. But again, goblins appear in many forms across media, including Gremlins, Star Wars, and Pokemon. So get creative and make something new. Up next though, we have the Goliath, which is our cold, giant-blooded creatures that live in the high mountains. You would have proficiency in athletics, as well as ability to carry twice as much weight. You're also resistant to the cold, and you can shrug off extra damage that you take on occasion. And possibly even living in the same location, we can use this to reflavor and be a Yeti or an abominable snowman. I think this would also be called a Tear in previous editions, if I'm getting that right, as well as Uldras, who live in the mountains in the Feywild and are also good with the animals there, and the Erskine, which is a weaponized polar bear race from previous editions, or if you chose Dragonlance as a setting, the Ursai would be a similar flavor. And then you have the feral Gargans, which is actually a crossbreed between giants and Goliaths that look more monkey-like, and surprisingly being really bulky with cold resistance, gives us opportunities in the demonic persuasion, being the Belgura or an ice devil. It might also be interesting to be Krampus, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. It's like Bad Santa who punishes children who have misbehaved, or just be a giant snow golem or snowman, which came to life one day by placing a hat upon their head. But enough on Christmas. What about Easter? Let's look at the Harengon race. That's gotta be like my top 5 segues. That was good. But this is the rabbit folk of the Feywild. And if you choose this, you also get proficiency in perception checks, as well as a bonus to both your initiative and your dexterity saving throws. And then you also get a special hop, which I think increases your movement just a little bit, as well as jumping across further distances. So of course, this innate jumping ability gives us a lot of options for jumping animals, including frogs, kangaroos, jumping spiders and grasshoppers, kangaroo rats, etc. Be a frog folk or a bug folk, and actually take the bottom half of a grasshopper with a top half of a fairy or humanoid, and you get the Grig, which is also a Feywild local. But it might also be fun just to switch up what your rabbit kind of looks like, make it look like an Almirage with a unicorn horn on their head, or a jackalope, which a lot of us are familiar with. There's yet another one called the Wolpertinger, if I said that right, but they have wings. And you could use like the Aarakocra stat block probably for this, but You could get fly some other way or just have your wings be vestigial. But your abilities don't really have to come from an animal-like nature. They could also come from psionics with a telekinetic jump, or spring shoes from an artificer. From previous editions, you also have the Nerafim, which is like a Slod cousin, but also with great jumping ability. Or from Australian folklore with the Yaramayahu, which is a frog-like humanoid that, again, jumps really far, but also sucks blood from their suckers on their hands, and that if you are ingested and then puked back out a number of different times, you become one of them, apparently. Next up, we have the Hobgoblin, which is goblin folk, but a little taller and a little redder. They have dark vision, advantage against being charmed, as well as advantage on skill checks if allies are nearby. You also get extra benefits if you ever take the help action, including bonus temporary hit points, extra walking speed, or causing disadvantage on an enemy attack roll. And firstly, I think that a lot of these abilities are more cultural and social abilities, which are harder to reflavor in most cases, but also makes great opportunities for more Fey-like creatures. But this could really just be any creature that was Fey lost or were influenced by the plane of the Fey in some way or another. But you can also reflavor these boons that you get while helping others as inspiration from a bard or blessings from a cleric, or even abilities from a vampire. These might be tarot cards that you pull from a deck, or a shadow that follows your friends around. Get creative with it, because it's one of the races with abilities that can really complement a class choice that you use, tying in the flavor to be a part of your class instead of your race. But next we have the Kunku, our wonderful flightless version of the bird folk. You have excellent memory, you get to roll with advantage when you're trying to mimic someone's voice or copy somebody's handwriting, and you can actually mimic other voices perfectly if you've heard them. And you also get extra skills in which you can choose to get advantage on from time to time. And now, bird flavor aside, let's just say that these are fantastic abilities to use in any intrigue campaign where you're trying to deceive or steal or manipulate in some way. Be a humanoid of any race and just have an edge on documents and disguises. But looking at other creatures that also have a similar ability to the Kunku would be the Lucrata, possibly making more of an anthropomorphic one. The Campestri might also make a good home here, but you could also be a type of construct that records and plays back voices like Siri. You know that nowadays they can fake anybody's voices. So like that. And I think the Anvil Rot Raptor also has this ability. So, you know, mechanical memorization. Another one would be the Gazer, but you will have to reflavor their I-beams as, I would say, maybe spells in a different class that you take. But of course, we would be remiss not to mention the Hag, which are known to lure people in with voices of their loved ones. But if you really wanted to keep the flightless bird trope, you can also reflavor it to be penguins, ostriches, kiwis, emus, or dodo birds. But I feel that you can make really any bird a flightless one and just trade their wings for an extra pair of arms, which is basically what the Kunku are. Because I think it would be a crime not to have a parrot with similar mimicry ability. But speaking of mimicry, feel free to mimic or steal any of these ideas. And if you've come up with some of your own or different ways to reflavor these races, please let me know and put them in the comments below. I just hope that I've sparked some of your creativity and gave you more ideas to play with. And before I leave you, I just want to say thank you for all of those who have stayed this long in the video. I know that you guys are my loyalists, so I want to give you a little heads up. I have some big things planned for my Patreon and other content that I'll be sharing with you guys, but for this content, I am in need of writers, storytellers, and content designers to help me in these future projects. So if you have experience with creating D&D content and believe in what I do on this channel, contact me through my email linked below in the description. But in the meantime, go out there and spread the good word of D&D and make the world a better place, both on and off the table. See you in the next one.